If Plato was the greatest philosopher of the Western world, and that has been said often through many generations, by Alfred North Whitehead most recently, who said that Plato was the only philosopher of the Western world, everything since has been footnotes. If that is true, I'm not sure it is, but if it is, I say to you, Joseph Smith then was a profounder man than Plato. But he had the added advantage of the Holy Ghost. He says, the things of God are of deep import, and time and experience and careful and ponderous and solemn thoughts can only find them out. Thy mind, O man, if thou wilt lead a soul unto salvation, must stretch as high as the utmost heaven, and search into and contemplate the darkest abyss. Thou must commune with God. He begins his own account of his life by saying he had a playful and cheerful temperament, or the exact language, native, cheery temperament. Thank the Lord, he did. It stood him in good stead. If you read all of the witnesses, there are few manly sports that he didn't have a try at, and there were many in which he excelled. For example, he wrestled, and wrestled effectively. He jumped at the mark, which is a situation where you simply drew on the ground a mark, then jumped and marched where you landed, and then challenged someone else to match or exceed. He pulled up stakes, two men facing each other, placing feet against feet, and then pulling. The stronger is the one who remains on the ground. The other comes up. There's another version of that where you hold face to face a pole, something like a broomstick, and then pull down. The stronger of the two holds and his hands don't slip. The weaker's hands slip. He also, with the boys, played baseball and variations on quoits. He was known to create games with prizes, including booby prizes. On other occasions when he did that, he would say, "You must excuse me, but when I'm with the boys, I make all the fun I can." Some from foreign lands and some from the United States. Many out of course, New England, with its conservative and sometimes rigid puritanical traditions. Others from movements such as the Quaker and Baptist movements. Many who compared on early encounters Joseph Smith with his brother Hiram remarked that Hiram seemed to them more in the image of what they thought a prophet should look like and behave like. He was, they meant to say, more sedate, sober, serious. In contrast to which the prophet, for all of his sobriety under proper circumstance, was a hail fellow well met, easily inclined to laughter. There were ministers who came intending to tie him up, as they had bragged, over scriptural analysis, and they kept trying to push him in a corner, and each time he not only had answers but questions for them that they couldn't handle. And finally they became convinced that it would be better if they left. And as they went to the door, the prophet preceded them, went out, made a mark on the ground, and jumped and said, "Now, gentlemen, you haven't bested me at the scriptures. See if you can best me at that." And they went away much incensed. There was a man who came who had developed a certain falsetto. We in our generation are not familiar with it. But in preaching without public address systems, some Methodists, for example, in the role of exhorter, would pitch their voice high and shout so loud it could be heard a mile. Sometimes they prayed that way. And one man with exactly that tone came and said, with a kind of supercilious reverence, "Do I have the privilege of flashing my optics on a prophet of God?" And the prophet replied, "Maybe you do. Would you like to wrestle?" he went away upset. When a man of that same stripe worked with the prophet in the fields, and it was a little upsetting to see a man, a prophet, out cutting wood and perspiring, came in for lunch, the prophet calling him to pray, and he said about such a prayer, shouting. The prophet didn't interrupt him, but when he was through, he said simply, "Brother, don't ever let me hear you pray that way again. You don't have to bray like a jackass to be heard of the Lord." He went away upset. We should mention one other story. George A. Smith was a cousin of the prophet Joseph Smith and was, in girth at least, a larger man. He weighed nearly 300 pounds. They were discussing William W. Phelps as an editor, and Phelps had a gift as well as a curse for using language in a most abrasive way. He managed in his editorials to offend almost everyone. George A. Smith responded that he thought Phelps had a certain literary zeal and that as far as he was concerned, he would make him editor of his paper if only he had the right to read it. The prophet laughed at that and said, "George A., you have it just about right." And then he hugged him and said, "George A., I love your soul." And then this bit of serious counsel. Never get discouraged. If I were in the deepest coal pit of Nova Scotia and had the Rocky Mountains piled on top of me, I would not be discouraged, and I would come out on top. George A. was moved almost to tears and said, "I hope my love will be shown to you by my actions, Joseph."